I hope that you're all okay. Welcome to this online launch of the Policy Brief series on the Coalition of Willing for Ukraine, hosted by the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs. This webinar will be recorded and posted on our website. The Q&A function is already open, so please do not hesitate to post your question from now on and throughout the session. Okay. My name is John Karlsrud, and I'm a research professor and manager of the Ukraine Center here at the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs. I co-lead this project together with Yves Reikers, who is an associate professor at Maastricht University. The Coalition of the Willing. It's really up on the top of the agenda, and as negotiations to end the war in Ukraine have intensified in recent months, the question of how Ukraine can be offered credible and secure and durable security guarantees has become increasingly pressing. The Coalition of the Willing, a group of now 34, mostly European states, led by France and the United Kingdom, has repeatedly indicated its readiness to support Ukraine with a multinational force should a peace agreement be reached. In September, French President Emmanuel Macron announced that 26 coalition allies had committed to securing Ukraine by deploying troops on the ground, at sea, or in the air immediately following a ceasefire or peace agreement. In October 2025, UK Defence Secretary John Healey further stated that 200 military planners from more than 30 nations were developing detailed plans to prepare a multinational force for Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire. And yesterday, the Coalition of the Willing met in Berlin, and in the joint statement following the meeting, the leaders reaffirmed their readiness to deploy troops into Ukraine and also said that the US was ready to provide robust security guarantees. Yet, the broader public remains short on data and detail. While scenarios with varying levels of ambition and pragmatism have circulated, little is publicly known about what such a force would realistically look like, what political conditions have to be met by coalition members, and what military capabilities they are willing and able to make available. To fill this gap and inform public debate, we have convened experts from 16 countries as well as Ukraine and the US. Contributors were asked to reflect on these two central questions. Is your country willing, and on which terms, to contribute to a multinational force for Ukraine? And what is your country able to contribute? What type of capabilities can it contribute with? Before giving the floor to 5 of the national experts to present their insights, we would like to just use the small opportunity to thank all 29 experts and 18 reviewers who have voluntarily contributed to this project. Their dedication enabled us to move from concept to publication in just 2 months. We believe this achievement demonstrates the commitment we all share to Ukraine and Europe's security. Finally, a special thank you goes to the NUPI communications team for invaluable assistance at short notice in publishing the briefs and organizing this event. Each of the presenters will have 3 to 4 minutes to present their briefs, focusing on the core questions and expanding on country-specific elements. We expect that you all have questions and comments. These can be posted in the chat, and we will read them out for the panelists after the briefs. So, on that note, we would like to give the floor to the experts. We have made a selection to provide a balanced picture, both geographically, strategically, and in terms of political and military context. So, first, and also note that there will be other of the experts, the authors of the briefs will be present in the meeting, so you can post questions also for some of the other countries, and they might be able to answer. So we'll start with the brief on Finland, presented by Tiina Karjalainen from the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Tiina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you very much for this great initiative. So, our analysis on Finland, we had a title for it, capable but informed by frontline realism. And this title really summarizes our point, which is that Finland is a supporter, strong supporter of Ukraine, militarily capable of participating, but its participation is limited by its geographic position. At the political level, we see that President Stubb, of course, has been quite invested in diplomatic efforts linked to security assurances on Ukraine. The Finnish citizens support this effort and military aid to Ukraine in general, and also parliamentary political parties are in favor of contributing to this effort in some form, however, notably excluding any combatant duties. Why Finland supports this effort? The self-evident factor is that Russia is perceived as a long-term threat. Second, Finland wants to see Euro-Atlantic commitment on Eastern European security. Three, there is, of course, historic solidarity solidarity for Ukraine linked to Finland's own historical experiences. Pulling factors at the same time include that most importantly, Finland is a frontline state responsible for half of the NATO's Russia border, and it does expect increased Russian military presence near its border in the future. So Helsinki does not see European deterrence as a whole improved by moving troops from Finland to Ukraine. Additionally, the current ambiguity around the plan for the multinational force, including its mandate and details, has risen some concerns linked to escalation, basically. Is Finland militarily capable? Yes, Finland is well equipped to contribute to a multinational force deterring Russia, in particular in land domain. Whether and how these capabilities, however, fit and would be feasible to plug in remains open. Moreover, as you might know, there are some ongoing capability development processes in Finland that both enable and constrain Finland's participation. The most important factors that shape Finland's contribution is firstly the mandate, so whether it is more a peace operation, a train and equip operation, or a battle group. Second, what is the level of the US commitment to the force and to European security more broadly? Three, how credible is the ceasefire? And four, how the operation would impact NATO's overall deterrence and collective defense. So, in sum, Finland is committed to contributing, but the exact nature of the commitment still remains open. And finally, the current planning of the operation is understood as a bigger question than Ukraine. So it goes beyond the current war and is perceived as reflecting the emerging new reality in transatlantic division of labor, as well as in terms of new forms of European military cooperation. I'll stop here and look forward to hearing from others.
Thank you so much. We'll now go to United Kingdom. Ed Arnold from the Royal United Services Institute. Thank you.
John, thank you very much. And I think in terms of the title that I chose for the UK country profile, it was leading politically, but military questionable. I think like France, the UK is pushing for a leadership role, both in terms of the coalition of the willing, but also the multinational force Ukraine, and really sees its role is in terms of diplomatically a lot of effort on the US position to get the US security guarantees for Ukraine, but also in terms of convening within Europe itself. And it's probably quite important to add, it's not just the Prime Minister doing this, but actually behind the scenes, the National Security Advisor, UK National Security Advisor Jonathan Powell, has been at the majority of the meetings on both continents and is obviously very heavily invested in this. So really it is the UK and France as the nucleus of the force, which is quite like European security of the last couple of decades in terms of the only expeditionary capability, both in terms of political appetite, but military capabilities has come from the UK and France. So it is pretty obvious that they are forming the nucleus. The drivers from the UK side really, I think, fourfold. First, to demonstrate to President Trump and the US administration that the UK and European allies are willing to step up for their own security. Secondly, solidarity with Ukraine, and certainly the discussions and the sort of almost the formation of the coalition of the willing as this current entity happened just after President Zelensky and the bust up in the Oval Office in late February. Third, to push Russia to agree to some form of ceasefire, or at least moving the war into the next phase, whatever that may be. I'm pretty skeptical of both a ceasefire and a potential deal on peace. And then fourth, I think worth noting probably on the UK and the French side, is also that the UK experiences a lot of political problems at home as well. So pushing this in terms of European security, doing things for allies, is obviously very politically powerful for the government. And then in terms of the military, I mean, like my earlier point on the UK and France, the UK deployed division in Iraq and also multinational brigade in Afghanistan. So in terms of command maturity, the UK is very well placed to lead. And due to this leadership, I assess that in the land domain at least, that a brigade force of 5,000 is the absolute minimum that the UK would be able to provide for other countries to plug into. But obviously, if it's 5,000, that's actually 15,000 because of the nature of rotation, training, and deployment, which would be 20% of the on-strength UK force, or 27%, bearing in mind that only 77% of the UK army at the moment is deployable. So that would have a knock-on effect for other UK commitments to NATO in terms of support for SECA's strategic reserve. However, my view on the whole Multinational Force Ukraine is if a war between NATO and Russia was to break out, that force would not just be sitting static in Ukraine. It would be there to at least fix forces, Russian forces in the south, and potentially actually join, a military operation from the south. So actually, I don't see this linkage where we have that, any forces going to Ukraine automatically takes away from the Baltics. Geographically, it does. But I think those two theatres are interlinked, and that's important context. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ed. Let's move straight forward to Ellie and the French perspective. Ellie Tenenbaum from the French Institute of International Relations. So the two lead nations here.
Yeah, thank you, John, and thank you for this great initiative. I think that the result is really outstanding and very, very aptly put. Regarding the French position, so basically, and very convergent with what Ed just said, the French response, or the French initiative to the coalition of the willing, along with the British one, is really sort of a response to an anticipated U.S. thirst toward ceasefire/peace, and it can be traced back to I think the Notre Dame meeting in December 2024, so exactly one year ago, between President Trump and President Zelensky and President Macron, where there was some sort of tacit agreement that there would be a work share divided this way. The U.S. would try to negotiate to bring Russia to the table, Ukraine would sort of lower its conditions for ceasefire, and then Europeans would do what is needed to guarantee Ukraine's security, to compensate this reduction of ambitions, which can be very much discussed as itself. But this was, I think, the beginning of what would become then the coalition and the lineaments of the Multinational Force Ukraine. A French perception of what a multinational force Ukraine would be, I think, is very important to distinguish from the notion of peacekeeping operation. We have often heard the term peacekeepers in the spring and over the summer, less so these days, but it has never been in French perception. I don't think in British either. A blue helmet style observers along the line of contact that would, in a way, either observe or even hold the line in the stead of the Ukrainians. It was always meant to be because this was never perceived as neither realistic nor practical, but rather as a deterrent force meant to, I would say, discourage not day-to-day violation of possible ceasefire by the Russians, which is basically what happened throughout 2014 to 2022, and was expected to keep on happening in case of a ceasefire. But to discourage a resumed large-scale offensive of the kind that we saw on the morning of February 24th, 2022, by putting a number of military assets in the way that would sort of ensure the fact that such a resumed large-scale offensive by Russia would have dire strategic implications, including eventually military implications for Russia. So basically, a tripwire kind of model force, a more robust one than the one we see in the Baltic states, for instance, but still very much. Because the idea was that they could still sort of plug in a possible gap in a Ukrainian lines, which would remain basically the most important line of effort, but mostly to have this sort of political meaning for what would sort of to follow. So basically, the Russians of violating in terms of military capability and contribution. So pretty much the same as for the British. Command and control, planning capability. We actually have an already operational headquarters in Paris with the two-star general, which is co-headed by the British, which is currently right now only in a planning mode, but ready to be activated. Air component, maritime component with a Turkish lead on that, and a more controversial land component that could be, depending on the view, mixed with the train and equip mission. Land component being as for the what Ed just said for the Brits, a brigade size at least. Now, obviously, the big problem is that all this is pendant a ceasefire that, as I think we most of all agree, is not coming, or at least immediately to be ready. So the question has moved further and further since the Anchorage meeting to what could happen in a pre-ceasefire mode, including in basically using the air component to move some assets in the shooting war. But of course, this induce a lot of risk taking, which is not exactly the same as risk daring in a post ceasefire environment, and there has been less political consensus about it. There also been some criticism in France that said that basically this MNFU, Coalition of the Willing talk, was a way to sort of divert away from the question of assistance to Ukraine, in which France has been very much lagging behind, and I've been myself pretty critical of that. And finally, regarding the political constraints, as much as, and we emphasize that in our brief, the French president has a lot of constitutional leeway to basically deploy troops without even having to consult the parliament before 3 days, and without having a parliamentary vote before 3 months. The truth is also that there is a political situation in France right now with a minority government that also kind of narrows the perception of a bold move by the president on this matter, as we say, especially if there is not a large European coalition to back it up. So on this kind of limitation notes, I will leave it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Eli. We'll then move to Helena Eglit from Estonia. Hi, Helena.
Hi, thank you for having me. It was interesting to hear my colleagues, especially from the French and UK perspectives. I hope this view from a small country like Estonia, especially as a country who shares a border with Russia, adds a useful perspective to this discussion. First, Estonia is very aware of its limits of being a small state. However, it was among the first to signal its willingness to contribute to the MFU, offering a ground combat unit of up to company size, which means around 200 personnel. Estonia is likely to contribute on land, at sea, but not in the air. But of course, this is just the willingness that has been signaled by the government, and any deployment requires parliamentary approval by a majority of the 101 members. So by arguing early on that Estonia is able to participate in the mission, Estonia's foreign policy focuses on leading by example, shaping the public narrative, and also building coalitions. This kind of early commitment hoped to send dual message. First to the West, encouraging other countries to contribute to the mission as well, but also signaling Russia that we are not afraid by them. And participating in these international missions has been a tool for Estonia's foreign policy for the past 30 years. It's nothing new for a small country as Estonia. So Estonia has so far participated in over a dozen international missions in places and other NATO members in Mali, Iraq, the Balkans, and so on. So today, when it comes to this potential mission to Ukraine, around 60% of Estonians oppose sending their soldiers as peacekeepers to Ukraine. However, 48% of Estonians believe that Ukraine should not cede Russian occupied territories for peace. Considering the fact that actually the opposition of deploying or opposition to deploying a combat unit in Ukraine is not higher than for opposition to previous missions, it may be easier for the government to explain why a potential mission to Ukraine matters for Estonia's own security, especially as the overall support for Ukraine in Estonia remains strong. So shortly, let's talk about the conditions as well. First of all, especially as many other missions that Estonia has previously participated in, these missions didn't always have a clear exit strategy and a clear goal. So these two things, the strategy and a defined goal, should be in place before Estonia commits. The other thing is, of course, the ceasefire or peace agreement. However, the peace agreement must not restrict Ukraine's future foreign policy choices or impose territorial concessions. And also, it must not let Russia rebuild its military. The question of mandate is also in place, and I think it's the most difficult one for all of us. And the fourth kind of condition is that although Estonia has not publicly stated or declared this, it's very probable that Estonia, as a small country, will not participate in the mission if the bigger countries, such as France or UK, decide to opt out, especially as the regional power Poland has already declared that they are probably not gonna join the mission on the ground. And I saved the key question, why Estonia is willing to participate for last. I think it's very obvious to many here. Of course, there's this notion that from Europe in general, that Ukraine's security is not separable from Europe's security, but also the Estonia's own experience of Russian occupation plays role in here. So Estonia has always had placed international law, especially territorial integrity and sovereignty, at the core of its foreign policy for the past 30 years. So it will definitely remain a position here as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helena. Now we're turning to Ukraine, to Stanislav Boyko, who's going to present us with a bit of a comment back to what he's hearing and when he's reading and seeing all the discussions around the Coalition of the Willing and the Multinational Force Ukraine. How useful is this, and what can be done differently going forward?
John, I think it would be wiser to put me in the last turn, because I'm afraid I could distract some further speakers. But since I'm already on the stage, I would like first to make a little disclaimer that I'm just presenting an expert opinion of my research group, not opinion or position of any of our government or official bodies. This is only our expert opinion, and this is as follows. We are discussing here the thing which is not going to happen in any foreseeable future if we speak of this Coalition of the Willing initiative in terms of troops on the ground. This is a thing that is not going to happen for both political reasons and military factors. In political terms, it is not going to happen because European governments are actually unwilling, despite the name Coalition of the Willing, and in military because they are incapable. And I could put period here actually, but I think it would be misunderstood. So I will develop my point. Hearing, reading, listening to, seeing all the caveats the nations provide when they speak about the multinational force in Ukraine, this is actually the number and the essence of these caveats actually make an effective block to real implementation of this initiative in any foreseeable future. This includes I am in if a big brother is in, I'm in Washington. I am in if this is NATO operation and not just initiative of some countries. I am in if the most are in. I am in, but not in combat functions, etc., etc. So actually, I don't see. I don't even take now the issue of peace deal probability, because I don't see science actually is acting servicemen of the armed forces. I don't see any signs of any real good faith of Russian part to make this effective peace deal. And even if we don't take this issue for political, in the political realm, we all know the track record of Russian attitudes towards its agreements, and we know that the presence of troops from Europe as purely symbolic act would not work, and would not make Russians keep its agreements. And here we proceed to the second part, to the military. As I said, military incapable. Why? Because it would be effective and it would work if these troops would really present a formidable and effective military force that would make Russia not repeat its aggression, and this is not the case because I hope I'm not the only person here to understand that despite economic erosion that I hope would kill Russia some time in the future, in the quite distant future, actually. But in terms of military capabilities, Russia, after the 4 years of this war, Russia turned to be more powerful and more capable than it was before the 2022. And now if we don't take United States, because it's now not a constant but a variable in this equation already. As for European conventional forces, land forces especially, Russia outpaces and outnumbers both in pure numbers of personnel and conventional military equipment and demo, and let alone the next generation warfare capabilities, including drone warfare capabilities, including new combat system, networked combat systems used for combined air raids, for watering munition and drone attacks on the tactical level. So with all this power, and I am certain your leaders are perfectly aware of this, that these troops on the ground, as positioned as combat force, would make rather a trigger and a pretext for Russians to make provocations, to make hybrid and sub-threshold hostilities, and eventually to use it as a pretext for aggressions, for example, in the Baltics, by making some provocations under the false flag, for example, and then using it as a casus belli to attack NATO in some direction, in some other direction they consider weak, etc. And this does not mean that our position is that coalition of the willing is not a good initiative. It's perfectly a good initiative, but we need to redefine and to broaden its concept from narrow. It's exactly about providing Ukraine with effective working security guarantees, but not to narrow down these guarantees towards the NATO troops on the ground in Ukraine, because this would not be a security guarantee. In fact, the key security guarantee, if we take the land domain, for example, would be to help us keep big, well equipped and well armed Ukrainian armed forces. And for other domains, this is where the aid and presence and engagement of European partners would be really more helpful and useful, especially the air domain. This is where exactly coalition of the willing members could contribute with less risks and potential losses for them. To start with, protecting the western NATO bordering regions of Ukraine, for example. But we in Ukraine often cannot understand why to wait for peace deal, why not to do this right now, especially given that Ukrainian Russian drones intervene, and already there were cases with Russian manned aircraft violating NATO airspace, so you have full legitimate right to make such a buffer zone and protect our skies in the western regions. This would let us optimize our air defense resources to make more solid protection of the other territory. There are also, of course, other areas where coalition of the willing could provide great contributions, including some logistics and repair capabilities, especially for those Western provided equipment that we often spend enormous and bigger than needed time to provide some damaged equipment back to your countries to get them repaired and then get back. Such kind of presence would be very helpful and fruitful. This also, of course, if we speak about post-war recovery, any demining contributions would be especially exceptionally helpful, especially given expertise and proven expertise of the Baltic states, of some other coalition of the willing nations in this area. And you know, Ukraine is already the most mine contaminated country in the world. And this is not the end of the story, unfortunately. And of course, I see it very, very important for coalition of the willing members, I mean military, including military personnel, come to Ukraine, communicate and work together with the Ukrainian military units to get our lessons learned here on the ground, not even maybe pretending it as and presenting it as combat presence, but just for your own benefit as well, because according to our forecasts, it might happen that in few years your military could be engaged in multiple operational theaters, both in Baltics and in Taiwan Strait, because if NATO exists, NATO is not just about United States protection of Europe, it's also engagement as far as I see, engagement of Europe to protect US if its interests are violated in some other regions. So as we see it, and our research team sees, some dark times are expected in the near term, and because the pacification of aggressor has gained the momentum and reached that point of no return, when the appetite of both Russia and, of course, China, seeing all this, also understands that international regulations do not work, that sovereignty is just and territorial integrity turns to be just fiction, especially if the peace deal even de facto legitimizes Ukrainian territorial losses. So this is not only our opinion. You see, there are a lot of other research and think tank surveys saying that somewhere in the sometime in the by the end of this decade, broader conflicts might emerge, and I would like just to conclude that, given all this, you'd keep your troops for yourself because you might need them, of course, but of course you would need them prepared for the next generation of warfare, not for the past war. But you could help Ukraine in numerous ways, apart from direct presence of troops on the ground, and this would be more helpful and more effective. And let's do it as quick as possible, because you know, the resilience of Ukrainian armed forces, it's not endless, and in terms of both personnel and in terms of the quality of this personnel, because, you know, the newly mobilized personnel is always worse than those that was unscripted as combat veterans, volunteers of the previous war, etc. Thank you so much. Maybe any question? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stanislav. For this fairly critical engagement, but also constructive. I think your points on how the Europe and the allied partners can engage and what areas that we have particularly where we really can support was very helpful and constructive. It also points to, you know, some of the limitations of the coalition of willing so far, in the absence of a clear objective. It's not yet clear what kind of contributions are needed. But I'll let now Yves Reikers, my co-initiator and co-lead of this project, give us a few kind of highlights of the full set of briefs. So over to you, Yves.
Thanks, John. And also let me take the opportunity to thank Stanislav for sharing some critical Ukrainian insights and putting also your finger on the sore spot, I think. Because what we get from this collection of policy briefs is, as you will have noticed from these presentations, but also from the entire full collection, which we obviously recommend you to read, is that most, if not all, of the coalition members make any sort of deployment conditional on a stable ceasefire or a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. And indeed, it's not controversial to say that we're not there yet. But still, we do believe that this kind of mapping exercise and this discussion and putting the finger on the sore spot is quite important, because with statements like the one made yesterday, where the joint statement, where they reaffirm a commitment to deploy a multinational force Ukraine, a certain political reality is created from that political signaling. And we believe that any public or political debate about a multinational force for Ukraine, it would do well if it's grounded in what we would like to call pragmatic realism, because media is discussing this, public opinion is discussing this, politics is discussing it. So at least we need to know what we're capable of and what we're willing to do. I think most of these European democracies, part in the coalition, they depend on domestic political and public support. So these discussions need to take place. At the same time, what we also get from these policy briefs is that many of the European countries, and particularly in Western and Southern Europe, but also Canada, they have only recently begun to take their defense capabilities seriously again. And with armed forces undergoing significant transformation, with investments that still need to pay off, that still need to ramp up, European leaders must be very cautious, also as Stanislav said, not to raise expectations that they cannot fulfill. And in that regard, what we basically get from this collection of policy briefs is two crucial questions that the leaders of the coalition, in our view, need to grapple with. And need to find an answer to. And the first question is, Russia will undoubtedly oppose any reference to such a coalition force in a future ceasefire or peace agreement. So the question is, how much risk are these coalition leaders politically and militarily willing to assume? What the briefings already show is that any sort of deployment close to the front line is not only militarily unfeasible, but also politically unthinkable. But even in the more likely scenarios, hypothetically, if a multinational force Ukraine would be established, the more likely scenarios that we see would be establishing some sort of a sky shield over western parts of Ukraine, operated from European air bases, contributing to demining operations in the Black Sea, or potentially even deploying troops on Ukrainian soil to provide training and logistical support. But also in these scenarios, the coalition leaders need to ask themselves, will they be willing to maintain resolve also if their forces are struck by an accidental missile or a drone attack? And that is a question that has yet to be answered. And then the second crucial question that we think that needs an answer is, it remains far from clear what kind of support the United States would be willing to offer, if anything at all. Thus far, Washington has not articulated a clear position on a potential backstop, whatever that may mean. We have only heard until yesterday ambiguous statements about security guarantees and Article 5-like guarantees, but we don't exactly know what that entails. So if these coalition leaders are serious about establishing a multinational force Ukraine, we believe that they also need to answer the question of how they will persuade the Trump administration to offer support and to offer long-standing and enduring support, both in terms of a credible backstop, but also in terms of strategic enablers, because it is also a truth that most of these European countries, also the UK and France, probably can't sustain a long-term commitment without the backup of US strategic enablers. So to conclude, and I think Max Bergman from the CSIS in his US position paper made quite a critical statement here, and I would like to quote him on that here. The quote goes, "The danger for Europe is that a proposal intended to show European seriousness and resolve may demonstrate the opposite," end of quote. So in that sense, let us emphasize once more that the best possible security guarantee for Ukraine, but also for Europe, is first and foremost a strong and strengthened Ukrainian armed forces. And that requires sustained financial support from European partners and a rapid increase in European rearmament. And these are two conditions after which a multinational force Ukraine only then can probably be thought about. So for now, I think we all agree that a multinational force for Ukraine is becoming some sort of political reality, but it still is very hypothetical in terms of putting it de facto on the ground. But planning is advisable, because if it does materialize, these European leaders need to realize that the coalition deployment will be there for a long run. So also they should act, plan and prepared on that assumption, while at the same time be very open and clear and transparent, both to Ukrainian counterparts, but also to their domestic audiences, about what the risks are of a potential deployment, what they're realistically willing to put in action, and what they're militarily capable of doing. I would like to conclude there, John.
Thanks, Steve. Very helpful summary of the briefs. Now we'll turn to the Q&A. I see we have a question here. There is strong evidence to suggest that there is currently a significant delta between the size of the required ground forces and what has so far been offered by the coalition willing. How can this be rectified? I think this speaks a bit to what I pointed out earlier. It's not entirely clear as of yet what the size would be. So, but maybe someone wants to jump in on this question. Yeah, I see Ellie.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think that this is a great question, and we asked about what is the requirement. Of course, it depends how you define the mission. What is the environment? If you are in a post-ceasefire mode, the requirement, of course, depends on what is the lasting size of the Ukrainian forces, because they may be a demobilization post-ceasefire, so you may not have the current force structure that you have in wartime Ukraine. Then, of course, the allied requirement would also sort of fit to what is needed. But if you maintain a reasonably high Ukrainian defense, forward defense, and then you define the mission of the NFU only as of plugging the gap and defending if there's a breakthrough, a Russian breakthrough, then a number of military experts consider that the ideal would be 5 brigades, but you can bring it down to 3 brigades. I'm thinking Mike Hoffman and Jack Watling's pieces. I was more into the 5 level, but they considered that a 3 mobile combined armed brigades could do part of the trick to sort of at least block the advance of a Russian breakthrough. Personally, I don't even think that Russians can actually have this breakthrough right now. So this is for the land domain. In terms of air domain, you can have different levels of air components. It depends on the real requirement is more on the ammunition side than on the number of planes. And what exactly size of the Ukrainian territory that you want to cover with your air assets, and what you let to the Ukrainian Air Force defense. But again, we need to think in combination with the Ukrainian armed forces and not in a replacement, which would not make any sense.
Thank you. Start.
Yes, thank you so much, because this is very subject-specific issue for now. The size, the numbers of the land component of the armed forces, and it is indeed, in fact, makes no sense, as it was mentioned, that in deployment of forces to replace any Ukrainian force is do not make sense, because the nature of war has primarily transformed the land component, and this is not the issue and the matter of size. This is primarily the matter of composition and the capability set that corresponds to the new realities on the battlefield. If you follow the latest developments in the Ukrainian front line, especially in the Donbas, in the Kupiansk regions, you would see amazing things that no other war in the last several hundred years has witnessed, when in terms of infantry, there are it goes about dozens or hundreds of soldiers on both sides, and they apparently decide the entire fate of the operational theater here and there, and it is just an appearance because, in fact, actually, at the contact line there are very few soldiers from both sides, but they are supported on the second echelon by a much bigger, technologically very sophisticated and very distinctly organized forces, including spectrum managers, drone operators, EW system operators, etc., etc., R&D capability carriers, etc. So without bringing the composition, structure, and capabilities of coming forces, even if we speak, but as I said, this is fantasy, but even if we speak about land troops, European brigades on the ground in the European soil, as they are, they would not, they would be just targets for Russian drone crews like Rubicon, and they would be done. And none of us would like to see this. So it would be much more fruitful exactly to focus on air domain and on supportive functions, and maybe if European forces are going and make some intent to engage, this should be gradual and symbiotic transition, not just deployment and standing, because this would never work. Even maybe it could work as symbolic issue, just here we are, and if you strike us, the entire power of NATO would attack you in return. But I'm not sure this would work with Russia, because Russian way of as masterminds of hybrid warfare, they are very they play much better in these tricks of sub-threshold issues than Europe and any other democratic nation. Thank you.
So maybe that's a good reminder that the different scenarios that we envisaged in this series of policy briefs is quite relevant. So what kind of coalition will we see on the ground? What kind of force? So perhaps as you suggest that a sky shield, a partial sky shield, is a more relevant capability that Europe can provide. Before I turn the word back to some of the country briefs, I think that's something that you can reflect on, and the kind of the willingness to provide that. But also, I would like to just use the opportunity to say that, in my opinion, that one of the most important functions of the coalition of the willing is its the ability to then to give an arena for partner states to meet outside of the not so well functioning institutional frameworks that we have at the moment. So with the Hungary, it's difficult in both and other states. It's difficult both in the NATO and the EU context, and the coalition really gives an opportunity to have that political conversation to move partners forward. But there's also there's the question of what will be the objective, what can we realistically provide, and then secondly, I think the burning question really out there is what kind of U.S. backstop and commitment can we expect? And on that, I would like to ask Max to also provide his input. So maybe we could start with Max now, and then run and get a little bit of readout from the US, and then get back to the other countries after that. And we'll pick up more questions as we go.
Well, thanks, John, and really appreciate being part of the whole effort in the conversation thus far. So I have a more skeptical view of the Coalition of the Willing, But when it comes to the US, I think we have to sort of understand where the United States is and has been when approaching Ukraine. And that is the number one overriding American national security priority when it comes to this war has been to not get into a war with Russia, to not have a direct U.S.-Russia war. Now, the United States has a lot of experience in dealing with partners and allies and client states and others, and our interests do not always align. And it is clear if I were in Ukraine and I were Ukrainian, my overriding goal would be to try to get the United States into a war with Russia because you're fighting for your survival in Ukraine. You want to win the war. And if you have the world's most powerful military force coming into this war on your behalf, that's a good thing. So I think we just have to realize that there's a difference in approach, strategy, and perspective. And so that always leads to some tension that the United States deals with a lot between its partners, but what its partners want from it and what it wants for itself. Now, not having the United States get into a shooting war with Russia, how does that apply here? Well, I think the coalition of the willing, if there is peace with Russia, I think would be outstanding and excellent that you would have then European forces on the ground. In some ways, what this is an Article 5 guarantee for Ukraine through the back door. It's pretending it's not an Article 5 guarantee, but that's exactly what it is. Because once you put European forces on the ground that are in Ukraine, that are liable to be shot at, and therefore would respond, then what you've done is created a security guarantee. Now, I cannot imagine Russia finding that acceptable. And if Russia were to find that acceptable, and we have to understand that this is all premised on a peace agreement, right? So Russia finding it acceptable. And those that argue, well, it shouldn't matter what Russia says, you should do this anyway and put these troops on the ground. And then you come to Washington asking for a quote unquote backstop, which sounds very anodyne. But what is that? What is a backstop? Well, it means that if the UK and France and others get shot at, then the United States is going to war to defend them. And I think that I think almost no administration would agree to that and would view that as potentially a slippery slope toward escalation. And especially not this administration. So I think we also have to be very realistic about what the Trump administration would be willing to do for Ukraine in European security. And I think if you look at the national security strategy, it's indicative of an administration that has a very hostile view to Europe as it currently is structured. So when it comes to the coalition of willing, I see the U.S. willingness to play a role in this as very, very limited and curtailed. And I don't see Russia actually willing to allow this because I think it would mean Ukraine has won the war, because it would mean essentially a backdoor security guarantee. And if we have a situation where the U.S. is not providing a backstop, we've basically walked away from European security, and Russia gives the go-ahead for European forces in Ukraine, I'd be very concerned about the potential escalation risk. And I think the question Europeans need to ask themselves is, are they actually ready for war with Russia? Because I don't think you put forces into Ukraine unless you are very alert to that possibility and ready to go. And when I say go to war with Russia, I mean without the United States. And I don't think that is where Europe is right now. I don't think Europe is postured for that. I don't think Europe has the defense industrial base. I don't think they're organized enough to do that. So for me, the coalition of the willing is a very useful effort in thinking about how Europeans can work together when it comes to Ukraine. But I also think it has become maybe somewhat of a distraction from the broader effort to really bolstering Ukraine. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Max. That's also a very clear and straight shooting message back. So maybe I'll pass that one straight if you're okay with it, Ed. How does this look like then from the UK perspective?
Well, I mean, ultimately, quite risky because actually, I mean, Max and I have discussed this at length. for quite a long time. The issue is, I mean, within Europe, that all of these assessments on whether it's 2, 3, 5, 7 years of when NATO may be at war with Russia, Russia recapitalizing to pose a threat to the Baltic states, they're all predicated on the war in Ukraine ending in its current phase, which would allow Russia recapitalization. So the real danger here is that we get to something which moves the war on a phase, and then you're effectively starting the stopwatch on when, you know, there might be escalation within Europe. And actually, I think, again, with this sort of issue around the US backstop, I mean, I don't know what an Article 5 security guarantee is. If the world, you know, if Article 5 was replicable, the world would be awash with organizations such as NATO, but they're not, because it's not just about Article 5, it's Article 2, it's Article 3, it's Article 6 in terms of the definition of Article 5. So the backstop issue really does, it's absolutely central. We're in a position now where the UK, there's almost okay, you know, show us what your 200 planners, your 30 nations, your convening has actually got. Deploy. And that could be calling Europe's bluff, because we may just not be ready at this current stage. We may be, again, we sort of made that point about the, you know, what's publicly available. But I think this is the really risky part now, that Europeans are going to actually have to stump up forces. And as a former NATO planner, former person who worked a lot, you know, in the UK side of it with DSACR in 2014 and DSACR's role within NATO as fourth generation, there was always that gap between what politicians and senior people would say on the military side for countries to say, yeah, we'll put boots on the ground, we'll increase our troop contribution to Afghanistan. It's very different when you actually go to the national missions and say, come on then, we need more forces. There's always those excuses. There's always the maybe not just yet. And I think you'll see a lot of that within those nations that have at least said rhetorically that they would commit, now that we're actually in this very sort of serious position. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ed. Helena, maybe we could get your perspective from Estonia on this. Kind of responding back to Max. What do you think when hearing those comments?
Yeah, thank you. I think that the question right now, the question is, are we still in this phase where we kind of deter the war with Russia, or are we still building our deterrence, or the question is, are we getting ready to war with Russia? And I think that this question of whether we are actually ready to go war with Russia is I think we should definitely ask this question, but I think we will never be fully ready to go war with Russia. I think that Russia wasn't ready to go war with Ukraine either. I don't think that Ukraine was actually ready to go with war with Russia in 2022. But as Timothy Gardonash wrote a couple of days ago about Europe's kind of how we need to build up our political will. That's also Stanislav mentioned that how we should that there are definitely ways for us to become more confident in this question, that we are actually ready to go war with Russia. So I think this question of confidence matters a lot, because as it was mentioned before, Russia is definitely the mastermind of disinformation, the information operations, and hybrid war, and the goal of the hybrid war is to kind of create chaos and panic among us, that that we are actually not ready, or we will never get ready. So I think it's an important question, but I think we should all find ways how to build this political will among us, and the coalition of the willing is definitely one of the ways to do that.
Okay, thank you, Helena. We'll move to Stas, who wants to respond to Helena, and then we'll go to Ellie.
Yes, thank you so much. I would like just to comment a little bit to Helena, just to make some small clarifications. This is not totally. This is not quite right that we were not prepared at all in 2022 because we already had the first wave of war with Ukraine, with Russia in 2014, and this makes difference because that made enormously important things for us. Of course, on the governmental level, we made many things wrong in 2022. We didn't prepare fortification lines and etc. But in terms of general preparedness of the society and especially of the military, because since 2014, when we exactly were completely unprepared, the army, the military had been during these 8 years had been radically transformed in terms of both C2 and in terms of equipment, in terms of new practices brought by civil society members that joined into 2014, and mainly this first war made the veteran corps of some several hundred veterans that with combat experience that made this withstood this first blow in the first months, and this is why we actually survived. This is the first issue. The second issue that you see, the nature of warfare has radically transformed during these 4 years. And now Russia possesses capabilities that radically differ from those conventional type, like some late 20th century style of warfare with armored fists, with columns of military tech, with artillery and infantry combat ranks, etc. This is now completely different, and Russia is going to attack in a completely different way if it does. And the third issue, which makes especially Baltics vulnerable, is there would be another strategic purpose as I see this. As for Ukraine, the purpose was to make a political full political control to impose full control over Ukraine by Russia. In terms of NATO states, Russia will seize some territory and then will try to hold it and provoke NATO pay enormous price for deoccupying it to impose political defeat of NATO. And one of the key edges of Russia is that it can sustain enormous human losses of its soldiers. It uses its soldiers in brutal mid-age ways. No European country would actually could afford, and this would put severe political challenges and dilemmas to decision makers in this case. So this is, I just wanted to clarify where there is difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Helena, you had a short, quick reply there?
Yeah, just very briefly. Thank you. I totally agree. I was more pointing to Russia's information operations, that even like 2022, people were surprised that Ukraine was able to fight back. I mean, here in Europe, like the West was really surprised that Ukraine is ready to fight, and that the war is still ongoing. And I would say that the same notion is kind of circling here in Europe as well, that Europe is weak, that this notion is kind of spread by the Russian Federation, and is also picked up by the Trump administration and their national security document. So of course Europe should do more, and in order to like kind of answer to these threats, we should definitely do more. But we also need to kind of understand that there are some info operations that Russia is currently circulating. And the other thing is of course that the Baltics is one of the most vulnerable parts of the NATO. But of course there are so many different ways how to approach this issue that actually I would say that we were more vulnerable 4 years ago, where when Finland and Sweden were not yet part of the NATO. So again, it's about our political willingness, and I would say that the coalition of the willing is somehow helping us to get ready whatever comes.
Thank you. Ellie.
Yeah, thank you very much. Quick response to Max, and kind of follow up of our discussion we had actually last week in DC. I'm personally not in favor of asking Russia's permission to deploy, nor in a way U.S. permission for that matter, nor backstop. As far as I know, no U.S. administration official has yet explicitly said that the U.S. would oppose the deployment of such mission either before or after a ceasefire. They went more or less in favor of it. They were just kind of rejecting the idea of a backstop. And, if this mission is deterrence as its core, and deterrence basically is a manipulation of risk. It is about using this risk to make it go both ways. The real question is, would you think that Russia would be sure enough that the US won't do a thing if they attacked a forward posted European force in Ukraine, either before or after? Again, this is different, but kind of the same question in the end. So we don't need the US backstop. We just need the Russians to doubt that the US won't do anything, and probably this would be enough, and this has been enough so far in Vladimir Putin's mind, not to dare too much in terms of making an open aggression against European forces.
Thank you so much, Ellie. I guess you kicked the ball back to Max there, but before going to Max, I would just kind of just interject a little bit. So I guess one of the main almost surprises when looking at the coalition of the willing is that there has been significant political progress, at least in my eyes, over this last year, and that this has really served as a platform, an arena to come to some agreement and to find positions. And there also seems to be some movement on the US side now with the last statement from yesterday, although that is very unclear what that would entail. So that's good. But I guess that the potential negative side of this is that it sucks a lot of the air out of the room on the other very important debate and kind of issue to continue to provide economic and military support to Ukraine, which is really where in my view at least, part of the solution lies. So I guess there is a certain balance here. I guess that time is running up, so we should maybe now we will turn back and we'll give Max the word first, and we'll just hear from each of you a little bit on what you think is the way forward, and how the next steps will be, the most likely scenario. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks, and really appreciate the comments. And I guess what I would say is I think it is very difficult to count on this administration. And I think you would have to think about what happens if they give assurances to Russia that they would not act, or they just indicate clearly that they have no interest in actually backing whatever force is put in. And so I would pose it the other way. I think you can go into military operations thinking in best case scenarios, but you also have to think in worst case scenarios. What happens if Donald Trump is like, I don't know what this force is doing there? Well, no way the U.S. would come to back it up. Something I could definitely see. But even before getting there, I think there's no way I see Vladimir Putin saying yes to a European ground operation. So if this is put in against Russia's wishes, I think you have to assume that this force would be targeted, which then means you have to assume that Europe is ready to take that next step. And I think I guess I would just deeply question about how well this has been thought through from a political standpoint. It strikes me that the military planning going on is very useful, but the actual political thought process of what do we do, of how this all sort of fits together, has not really been thought through. It's sort of based off of, and this is according to European leaders, the presumption that this is a peacekeeping force or there to provide assurances after a ceasefire is reached. And there's a lot of faith being put in to the current negotiations that are taking place amongst ourselves between, the U.S. on one side and Ukraine and the coalition of the willing on the other side, as if the U.S. is the sort of on the opposite side of this issue. But this is, what was just delivered yesterday was a negotiation amongst ourselves that resulted in something that will now go back to Moscow, and I have very low probability of that being accepted. So I think, just to close, John, I would say the real issue is sustaining the Ukrainian war effort. That's the reparations loan, but it's got to go beyond that and thinking about a broader strategy of how do you elevate the Ukraine's military capabilities so that it can actually take the war to Russia, and you actually have Russia willing and eager to come to the table to negotiate terms to end this conflict. And that's just something I don't see right now, because I think the way Russia perceives of it is that they're on the right side of this war, right side of this attritional war. So I think in some ways the coalition of the willing very useful. In other ways, politically, I think it's a distraction from the broader needs of how do you support Ukraine to be its own deterrent, to be its own security guarantee.
Thank you. Who wants to be next? If nobody jumps to the stage, I'll ask Kalle, who hasn't yet been on the stage. Kalle Håkansson, Sweden.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Edith and John, for setting this collection together. I think that Stockholm has been quite forward-leaning towards the coalition of the willing. Sweden has been a strong supporter. It has publicly said that it wants to contribute in militarily, although in my perspective, going forward, I think that we see, just as a lot of states, that Sweden is very politically willing, but it's militarily constrained. Looking at, for instance, the land domain, Sweden has NATO obligations to fill. It has real constraints on that sector. I think that the prime minister has also said that the air domain could be a sector where Sweden would contribute, and this could maybe be a way forward, given that now we have seen the enhanced cooperation with Ukraine, wanting to procure the Gripen fighter jets as well. So I think that this could be also something that we will see happening in that sense. but I'm just like Ed and Max, quite skeptical that we will see a mission in Ukraine. And I see risk that we are very politically engaged, but still military very constrained in that sense.
Thank you, Kalle. Fabrizio or Monica, do you want to take the stage? Just give the view of your countries, Poland and Italy. No. Yeah, Fabrizio is here. Thank you.
I hope you can see me. Yeah,
Yes.
thanks so much, first of all, of involved us in such an effort. Concerning Italy, I think also in these hours, it's quite clear that the Meloni's government is trying to navigate between the EU and the US, and between international constraints, a very complex, I would say, domestic scenario. Italy is an outlier in terms of public opinion and militarization in comparison to all the other European countries. So Italian public opinion is strongly against enhancing military expenses, and also is deeply divided on Ukraine. And as we have written, in a sense, we expect that Italy would follow the United States, so strongly opposing sending troops over there. Quite interesting to compare the case of Ukraine with that of the crisis in Gaza, where the Meloni's government it's ready to send its troops or the Carabinieri over there in line, with the requests by Washington. And the second aspect is a very, in a sense, problematic context in terms of the coalition with the League that, in a sense, on the one hand, supported the decision by Italy to send weapons to Ukraine, but on the other hand, in terms of rhetoric, the Salvini and the League strongly opposes that, so criticizing the Western, the European efforts in Ukraine. So it's not easy for Meloni to try to navigate about that, and it's quite interesting at the very end to stress the difference between Italy and the other countries, also in terms of information. So frankly, we don't know which kind of weapons we have sent so far to Ukraine. So we have a quite interesting, in a sense, context of depoliticization of the crisis in Italy. So the government, on the one hand, supported European efforts, but still devoting the primary, in a sense, importance to Washington, and try to adopt a sort of camouflage, a sort of obfuscation of what we are doing in military terms.
Thank you so much, Fabrizio, for providing that view from Italy. Now we're just going to give Stas a minute or two for his views, and then I'm going to conclude the meeting just after that.
Thank you. Just I would like just to comment, to make some small concluding comment on, as you said, what to do next, what we are going to focus on next, and supporting both your, John, and Max's comments that it is important to ensure that coalition of the willing initiatives do not distract us from the key line of effort, which is critical, which is crucial. It is supporting Ukraine in its military effort here and now, and we actually. As it was stated that Russians are masterminds of hybrid warfare, we actually now, after this couple of months of these endless negotiations, we consider this might be such a sophisticated psyop by Russians to use negotiation process to erode, to distract and erode both internally Ukrainian society and military, because no one can want to be the last soldier that died on at the war that ends tomorrow, for example. Yes, and by our partners, because if there is about negotiations, why should we still spend funds and energy to support military effort of Ukraine, etc. And it is critical to understand and to keep this understanding afloat that the war, there are no signs of ending war now, and the time is critical. Russians are pressing with enormous intensity on multiple fronts. Ukrainian army, it is true, we are severely short in personnel. This is the weakest link where this can break, actually. And now we are trying to supplement and how to say, to fill these gaps with robotization, with combat robotics and drones on some directions. We have successful cases, but we need to scale this. And we are surprised that now when it goes about the opportunity to deliver to us arrested Russian funds, then the key discourse is about how it can be spent on post-war restoration instead of thinking about using it for military needs, for no, exactly, not for government, our government, not for our refugees, not for our society, for military, because without military effort sustained, there are all other things are broken. You see, so this is the key issue. I would like to ask all our friends to translate among our partners. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stas, and thank you to for that very clear reminder of that we need to keep our eye on the ball and what is actually at stake. We really hope that the audience and everybody here have had a useful 1.5 hours together with us, and you please also go put the link for the website online so that you can go and read the briefs if you haven't done so already. So with that, I would like to thank all the contributors that are here and also those not here for writing these briefs, and I hope they will be useful in your future work. Stay in touch and have a nice day.